You won't like hearing this, but no one's coming to save you. No one's bringing peace to your door. No one's handing you clarity. And still, you have to find it, somehow. The world doesn't owe you ease, it owes you nothing. That's not cruelty, it's the rule. But here's the twist. Once you stop resisting that, you become unstoppable. Because nothing hits harder than someone who no longer depends on life to be easy in order to show up. That's what Stoics knew. That's why they were feared. They didn't need perfect conditions to act. They moved forward, through pain, through loss, through betrayal, through storms that would drown anyone else. They moved anyway. You've been tested. You've watched things break, inside and out. People left. Doors closed. Life collapsed. And you still woke up the next day. You still breathed. You still tried. That's not weakness. That's your origin story. Because becoming unshakable doesn't start with motivation. It starts with stillness, with radical acceptance, with the brutal realization that life owes you nothing, and the quiet confidence to rise anyway. Zeno didn't plan to lose everything, but he did. And that loss built stoicism. Nelson Mandela didn't plan to be caged for decades, but he was. And in that silence, he became free. Because power isn't about control, it's about response. And once you learn how to choose your response, you break the loop. You exit the prison. You stop reacting and start creating. You don't bend to circumstance. You bend your perspective. That's what separates the unshakable from the unstable. And that's where you begin. You don't become untouchable by chance. You build it. In quiet, in routine, in decisions no one sees. It doesn't look heroic. It looks boring. Like journaling when you want to scroll. Like walking when you want to hide. Like breathing through the storm instead of screaming into it. That's where you sharpen the blade. Not when people are watching. Not when applause is guaranteed. But when you're alone, and you still choose alignment over escape. Most people numb out. You slow down. Most people chase comfort. You sit with discomfort. Not because it's easy, but because you're tired of being ruled by it. Marcus Aurelius ruled an empire, but his real discipline? Ruling himself. Every day, every thought, every emotion filtered through one question. Is this within my control? If not, release. If yes, respond with virtue. That's it. That's the Stoic framework. It won't go viral, it won't get applause, but it will change your life. Because true power isn't loud, it's silent ownership of your energy, your triggers, your focus, your time. You become untouchable not when you win, but when you stop needing to. You're no longer reactive, you're aware, deliberate, disciplined. The world can't use your emotions against you if you've already faced them. It can't provoke chaos if you've made peace with your inner war. So when someone tries to insult you, you hear it, you understand it, and then you let it go. Not because it didn't sting, but because it's no longer your job to bleed for other people's projections. This is the root of resilience. Not fighting every battle, but knowing which ones are beneath your response. You don't need revenge. You need direction. And you're already walking it. Her name was Maya. Everyone thought she had it together. Sharp, responsible, unshakable. But behind the still eyes was a storm. She gave everything to her job. Took on projects no one else wanted. Said yes when she wanted to scream no. Until one day, she walked into work and found her desk cleaned out. No warning, no explanation, just gone. They said it wasn't personal. It always is. She didn't cry in the car. She didn't post online. She went home, sat in silence, and broke, quietly. For days, she didn't speak. Not out of sadness, but because she had nothing left to say. She thought she failed, thought she was disposable, thought maybe it was her fault. Then, she opened her old Stoic journal. Page 1. The obstacle is the way. Not a metaphor, a mandate. She started slow. Morning walks, no phone, just breath. She wrote down what she could control, her habits, her responses, her values. No one noticed. No one congratulated her for not falling apart. But she did something more powerful. She rebuilt without noise. Months passed. She didn't go back to the same job. She built something of her own. Coaching, teaching, not louder, just clearer. She still wakes up early, still walks without music, still breathes before reacting. Not because she has to, but because she knows who she is now. The setback didn't define her. Her response did. And that's you too, isn't it? You've been through something. You didn't crumble. You didn't explode. You absorbed the weight. And now, you're not bitter. You're calm. You don't shout to be heard. You whisper with presence. And if this hits somewhere deep, don't scroll. Subscribe. This isn't just a channel. It's where your silence turns into power, where your setbacks start to shape your strength. You're not done, you're becoming, and we're right here with you. Stoics didn't just wait for strength, they trained for it, every day, not in gyms, in the mind. They had tools, weapons no one saw. One of them? Premeditatio malorum, the premeditation of misfortune. It means sitting quietly in the morning and imagining everything going wrong. The delay, the betrayal, the loss, the rejection. Not to attract it, to prepare for it. Because the Stoics knew you don't rise under pressure by hoping for peace. You rise because your mind's already seen the storm and chosen how to stand. So you visualize the worst. Not to fear it, to rob it of surprise. And when it comes, because sometimes it will, you don't crumble. You nod, and you act. That's the power most people lack. They live in denial, then call it disaster when reality shows up. But not you. You've been training, quietly. You've stopped expecting the world to cooperate. You started expecting yourself to respond. That's where composure is born. Another Stoic weapon? Amor fati, love of fate. Not just tolerating what happens, but choosing to love it. Not because it feels good, but because it gives you something. A lesson, a layer, a mirror. When you adopt amor fati, you stop labeling life as good or bad. You see it as material. Everything becomes fuel. Even failure, even grief, even silence. You say, this too is mine, I'll use it. And in that moment, you stop being a victim of circumstance. You become an alchemist of pain. That doesn't mean you enjoy suffering. It means suffering doesn't define you. You're learning, shifting, hardening, not into stone, but into focus. It's not cold, it's clear. And clarity is dangerous to a world addicted to noise. You're not just stronger now, you're more intentional, more precise, less reactive, more rooted. You've tasted pain, but you've also tasted power, and you know where it lives now, inside you, waiting for the next test, not with dread, but with stillness, because you don't fear the fire anymore. You're walking through it, and it's shaping you. Most people think strength is noise, shouting, posting, explaining. But Stoic strength? It whispers. It shows up in a small word that shifts everything. No. No to chaos. No to distraction. No to old versions of yourself that keep calling you back. Saying no isn't rejection. It's redirection. Back to center. Back to clarity. You say no because your peace has a price now, and you're finally done selling it cheap. That's when the game changes. Because everyone loves the version of you that's always available, always agreeable, always tired. They fear the version that's deliberate, boundaried, silent. But here's the truth. You don't owe anyone your energy. You owe it to your mission, your stillness, your growth. Not everyone will like this new version of you. They'll call it selfish, cold, detached. But that's only because they've benefited from your self-neglect. You're not being cold. You're being clear. You're no longer living in emotional debt, over-apologizing, over-explaining, over-pleasing. You've stopped carrying what doesn't belong to you. And you're learning that silence isn't empty. It's protection. That distance isn't bitterness, it's clarity. You're not running away. You're moving inward, where your power was hiding the whole time. You stop reacting. You pause. You observe. And then you choose. Because that's what real control is. Not domination, but decision. You don't need to win every argument. You don't need to prove your point. You don't need to respond to every trigger. You've learned to walk away not because you're weak, but because it's no longer worth your presence. That's the shift. The shift from proving to protecting, from pleasing to preserving. And every time you choose that, you become more untouchable. You don't wake up powerful. You build it in small, invisible ways every single day. It starts with how you speak to yourself when no one's listening. Do you criticize or correct? Do you spiral or pause? Because the voice in your head, it's the architect of your future. The Stoics knew self-mastery begins with self-awareness, not just in crisis, but in routine. Discipline isn't a punishment, it's protection. You wake up early not for productivity, but to meet yourself before the world interrupts. You journal not to vent, but to track your internal weather before it turns to storm. You move your body not for a perfect image, but for internal integrity. Every choice, no matter how small, becomes a brick. And brick by brick, you build a mind that doesn't shatter. You don't scroll to escape. You sit, you breathe, you stay present. Because you've realized you're not bored, you're disconnected. And connection starts within. You start saying no to urgency. You move slower. You speak less. You observe more. Not because you don't care, but because you care correctly now. You no longer chase moods. You cultivate states. And that shift? That's what makes you dangerous. Because now, you don't need motivation to move. You move because it's who you are. You don't need praise to show up. You show up because it's aligned. That's real freedom. And it doesn't scream. It walks quietly through fire with a clear head and a steady breath. You're not becoming a machine. You're becoming disciplined. That's different. A machine reacts. You choose. You're not immune to emotion. You've just stopped obeying it. And every time you rise without drama, move without explanation, hold your peace when it's easier to explode, you reinforce the truth. This is who I am now. I don't flinch. I focus. And that's how you stay untouchable, not in grand gestures, but in the silent rituals that no one sees but change everything. There's something no one tells you about becoming stronger. You will outgrow versions of yourself you swore were permanent. And it'll feel strange, not because you regret the change, but because part of you still wants to stay loyal to a version of you that survived. But survival isn't the goal anymore. Peace is. And here's the truth. You don't owe your past identity anything. Not the one that stayed quiet to keep the peace. Not the one that over-explained. Not the one that lived for validation. Not the one that broke in silence so others could stay comfortable. You thank that version, and then you walk forward. Because the Stoics never romanticized suffering. They respected it, but they moved through it. And now it's your turn. You used to react. Now you observe. You used to please. Now you protect. You used to hope others would see your worth. Now you embody it. This is the quiet revolution. It doesn't need noise. It just needs you to stop performing. And you've done that. You're not looking to return to who you were. You're learning how to hold who you're becoming, even when it's unfamiliar, even when it's lonely. Because transformation is lonely. Not because you're doing it wrong, but because not everyone can come with you. And that's okay. The Stoic doesn't need a crowd to walk with conviction. He needs inner alignment. That's what you've earned. Not followers, but focus. Not applause, but awareness. You don't need to defend your growth. You don't need to explain your distance. You don't need to shrink for people who are committed to misunderstanding you. You are not arrogant. You are aware. You are not cold. You are clear. And from that clarity, a new kind of peace is born. One that doesn't depend on who stays, who supports, or who believes. It depends on you. And for the first time, that's enough. You didn't need to fight harder. You needed to stop fighting yourself. And you did. You stopped confusing chaos with passion. You stopped chasing closure from people who were never honest to begin with. You stopped being addicted to potential, in others, in your past, in a future that only existed in fear. And now you're here. Still, quiet, present. This isn't perfection. It's presence. The kind you earn by walking through fire without becoming it. No medals, no noise, just peace. And the beautiful part? Nobody saw it. They saw you disappear, but they didn't see the discipline. They didn't see the nights you wanted to scream, but stayed silent. The mornings you wanted to run, but walked anyway. The thoughts that could have broken you, but didn't. Because you chose different. You rewired your mind. You broke the cycle. You became the one who says, "This ends with me." And that decision didn't make you invincible. It made you unshakable. Now the world moves and you remain. Now pressure rises and you breathe deeper. Now the noise screams and you speak less, but every word hits. You are not seeking control. You are control. You are not reacting to life. You're responding to truth. And if no one ever says thank you for doing this hard, invisible work, let this be it. Thank you. You didn't have to, but you did. And because you did, you are now your own shelter. If this landed somewhere only silence usually reaches, subscribe. This isn't noise. This is a return to you, to strength, to stillness. And if you're ready to keep walking, watch the next one. You're not done. You're just getting started. Right here with InnerFort.